Okay.
Adil. Yep.
Though, oh my
Yeah,
god,
but-
I feel like I constantly try to like I definitely want to make sure that I pronounce it right, but I've
yeah, all
definitely
good.
like
Yeah,
practiced a bunch of times. I was like, oh my god, we're live by the way.
all right.
Hi Ado, welcome to Venture with Grace.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, I like your name. So like I feel like when we're doing the call, I was like, oh, like I feel like this name is like so fun to pronounce, but I constantly I feel like I butcher my guest names. Um
It's all good.
Like to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So you have held various like different leadership positions in engineering, from like Intuit to various company that gotten acquired by different companies to now you are the CTO of Fandom. Why don't we start with like what were some core career lessons that kind of shape you into who you are today?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's been a really fun journey with lots of interesting life lessons and lots of awesome people to learn from along the way. I think some that uh, have just been very consistent and have always I think proven to work for me is about caring about your user and your customer and really figuring out what you're trying to solve for them, what value you're trying to add for them. And so regardless of whether you're at a small company or whether you're at a large company, if your focus is on the customer, then you can figure out solutions to it, right? Like
Mhm,
it's not for me, technology is the fun part. Like, I'm a technologist at heart, like, started programming when I was in middle school, to computer science in high school, university, all that good stuff, right? But for me, it's always been in service to something and in service to trying to figure out how you're going to have a positive impact, on the user. So I think that's one particular one that I think has always been one of my north stars. I think some of the other ones have been about taking ownership, just never
mhm,
saying this is not my job. Like if you want to get something done, you work with others, but you don't necessarily just delegate something out or relegate something out to say
mhm,
I'm not going to do it. Like, and to give you an example, like not even I'm not even talking about technical stuff or professional stuff. When you're at a startup, for example, when you are absolutely starved for resources, somebody's going to do kitchen cleaning duty as well, right? And so you literally end up having a rotation, like who's going to be cleaning up the kitchen every week in a small startup
mhm,
office and so on. Which, by the way, was not fun for me. I don't like cleaning
mhm,
up the kitchen, but you take ownership, right? Like
mhm,
that's what you end up doing, and then it's about figuring out how do you deliver results, and are those results still valid or not? Let's say you start a journey, like you have something in your mind around what you're going to deliver, but things change along the way. You
mhm,
can't just be stuck on the goal that you set. You always have to make sure and reassess that the goal that you were going after still makes sense,
mhm,
and have the courage to be able to change that goal if you think that a different goal is going to be better based on the learning that you have. And
mhm,
these are consistent things, whether you're at a smaller company or at a larger company. And honestly, like the biggest one, especially as you scale,
mhm,
is that it's all about the people that you work with. You alone can only do so much, and you can actually do very little. And it's going to be about surrounding yourself with the best and the brightest people, but not just the smartest folks, but people are also passionate about what you're trying to do, and they're aligned with the same goals, so that you're all going after the same thing, and they can all internalize the same thing. If you don't have that, you could have the smartest people in the room, but if they're all rowing in different directions, you're not really going to get to where you're trying to get to. And so the,
mhm,
the people part of that equation, I think, is the most important. So I mean, there's so many lessons that that come across. But if I had to pick, like the two most important ones for me, one is about the people that you work with, and you bring on, and the other one is being focused on the customer. Honestly, you solve those two things, everything else can be solved. It's a,
mhm,
it's a subcategory for me. But without, like, if you fail on any one of those two main things,
mhm,
figuring out, like, not figuring out the value for the customer or not
mhm.
having the right people, um, then it's just way more challenging.
For sure. I totally agree with you on like the first two. I feel like they're like Amazon leadership principle related like values, since like you were the VP of Amazon. I'm sure like I feel like those are things that like it's like actually really resonating with me as well. So when it's like
Amazon leadership principles are awesome, by the way.
yeah, I
It's one of the only companies that I've seen
mhm,
that has done an amazing job of integrating their leadership principles into
yeah,
everything that they do. Like every company has corporate taglines, values, and so on, and
yeah,
it's with good intentions, and people try to
mhm,
live up to those. But I have never seen an organization do as good a job as Amazon in terms of
mhm.
integrating their leadership principles into literally, everything that they do.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's such like a I feel like scaling the culture or scaling these values is like extremely hard. When a company size like Amazon, it's like very crazy, and like everybody is still like following the principle and also like implementing it while like they're like kind of working. I feel like those are just something that's like very like impressive. So like about like always focus on the customer instead of your competitor, and also taking ownership of stuff that like uh having the owner's like mentality basically. And um I feel like what you said about it about people, it's like totally true, since like I feel like your product, your company is actually built by people, and those are like some really incredible lessons. I wonder, so like you have been acquired multiple times, and you also did the acquisition at your positions. Why don't we talk about like what were some insights there? So like what are the company that actually was on top of the radar of a company, and then or as a founder or founding team, like how do you kind of like get on the radar of like acquirer? And yeah, I would love to just learn that, because that was like very impressive that like you went through a lot of different companies, and then they all got acquired by like these like famous big companies as well, and eventually you were the CTO of LendingHome, and now you're the CTO of Fandom. Like I'm sure like you come across these like really cool value propositions from different startups and like just companies in general. Like how do you think about acquisition as a whole?
Yeah, it's a definitely a very interesting topic to dive into. Like, I
Mhm,
think I've just been fortunate to have been at a bunch of the right places at the right time, and I've gotten a lot of interesting learnings out of those. But I think some of the common patterns that I see in what has led to the acquisition for some of the places that I was at and others that I've seen is when you really start creating something that's unique or that's proving value for the customers,
mhm,
um, and then of course like from an acquiring company side, when you when they see that instead of competing with you, bringing you in house is going to be more valuable, and together you can do a lot more. That's what generally makes for good recipe. But
mhm,
there's so many things that go into that in terms of how you get there. And honestly, like you can have all sorts of strategies and so on, but in my opinion, luck has a lot to do with it as well in terms of having the right product at the right time. Sometimes you may actually be ahead of the market on a particular product or idea,
mhm,
and um, and even though it may actually be an excellent idea, you might not get to the outcome that you were looking for, and then sometimes it's absolutely the right timing. So I'll give you a couple of examples of I think interesting things that I've been through. So the 10marks acquisition happened by Amazon. Amazon ended up acquiring 10marks Education back in 2013, I think.
mhm,
One of the things that, in my opinion, that led to that was there was a big transformation happening in the education technology space at that point. Common Core was coming out, which was the standardized curriculum across 46 of the 50 states. And it was being rolled out, I think, around that 2013 timeframe and stuff. And so at 10marks, we made a very explicit decision
mhm,
that we were going to set ourselves up as the leaders for Common Core math from a
mhm,
digital content perspective. And so, from as a company, we were both not just creating our technology platform, but we were also creating proprietary content as well. And we thought that a lot of the publishers were just going to put a rubber stamp on their existing content and just say Common Core,
mhm,
whereas we were actually building something unique. But the
mhm,
challenge for us was how do you actually get to market in a very quick way? And
mhm,
we had to do a lot of very interesting things for that, right? Like pull a lot of stops and do many things that were very, very unconventional. For example, we had to launch 40,000 new questions of content,
Mhm.
but we didn't have time to build a new CMS for that content.
Mhm.
And so it originally seemed like an impossible thing to do. That's a whole different story in terms of like, what we actually ended up doing to get there. But the fact that we actually got there and we were able to launch all of that content in time ended up establishing us as one of the leaders in that space. And that's what got Amazon interested in us. And they originally came in and said, hey, we want to invest in your next round. And as they were doing diligence, they decided, you know what, we actually want you to be part of the fold. And our CEO decided that we could do way more with our combined power of Amazon and 10 Marks versus what we could do alone, no matter how much funding we raised. And so then that's what led to that acquisition. I think another one, like back in the day, was Homestead, so which was acquired by Intuit. I think that one was a very interesting one in the sense that Intuit used to be this, traditionally, if you go back like 15 years ago and stuff, 15, 20 years ago, Intuit used to be more of a desktop software company. And they had and still have leading products for small businesses like QuickBooks, for example, and eventually payroll and payments and so on. But it used to be more from a perspective of back office, right? Like traditionally, when you started a company, you would start putting together your books and so on, and then you would go get the company established, start building out your product. That changed, with the web. People would first put up a website, put up their web, not even a website, right? Like you basically establish your online presence, you start doing business, and then as you start making money, then you start figuring out like who's going to be doing your accounting and books and so on. And so the paradigm changed. And so Homestead used to be the company that used to provide presence to anybody who wanted to start on the web and have commerce and so on. And Intuit used to be more like, from the accounting side. And so as they were trying to transform, they decided, you know what, instead of doing this from scratch, there's a company that's already providing presence to so many folks and was already providing commerce and so on. Why didn't we bring that in-house? And then the other thing was Intuit was trying to move from being a desktop company more to a SaaS company. There are a lot of interesting things
Mhm.
already going on within the company as well, but Homestead was purely SaaS. And so by bringing in Homestead, they were able to help transform their DNA faster, in their migration to SaaS. And in fact, like some of the folks from the Homestead leadership team got to take on larger positions at Intuit and take on ownership of other properties at Intuit to be able to move those more towards SaaS, right? So there was a very strategic alignment in terms of how you were going through that acquisition and so on. I think a similar story for like Photosite, which we ended up selling to United Online back in the day, which was a photo sharing service, and Posters that got acquired by Twitter in 2012. So definitely like lots of interesting learnings across all of them. And the other big one was, while there are commonalities, every
Mhm.
single one of those transactions was different in terms of
Mm.
their the reasons for the acquisition, the type of due diligence that you actually go through for the acquisition, how the team is integrated afterwards, and so on. And so there were just a lot of interesting learnings through each and every one of them. I think the one by Amazon was the most amount of due diligence that we had to go through, and that in itself was an excellent learning opportunity in terms of how you build a company that can easily then withstand that type of diligence when you're going through an acquisition. Because that's another thing that people
Mhm.
generally don't think about, as they're scaling a small startup. But when you're raising your next rounds of funding, or when you're going through an acquisition by a larger public company, there's so much that you have to withstand from a diligence
Mhm.
perspective. And if you plan those things as small building blocks along the way, then it's just much easier to be able to deal with that versus having to scramble entirely at the end.
Mm. What kind of stuff do you feel like you should be prepared throughout the journey?
So I'll give you one very simple example that people don't think about from let's say, from a security perspective. So you start a small startup out, everybody's basic, everybody wears multiple hats, which is the fun part
Mhm.
of being in a startup. But from a technical perspective, a lot of times the way permissioning is set up across the board is that it's very lax in the start, because everybody has their hands into everything. Now,
Mhm.
it's not that when you're a startup, you can't do that particular part. In fact, you have to, right? Like multiple people have to do multiple things. But if you think through it a little bit more and you start setting up your structures in a way that can scale easily, then even though multiple people are doing things, they're still doing them as part of proper predefined groups. And so then as you start
Mhm.
bringing on, let's say, like, the 11th person and the 12th person, that 12th person may not need to do everything or have access to everything in the company. And so if you start thinking about those permissioning structures very easy, like a bit more deliberately from the start, then
Mhm.
it's easier to scale. Versus what happens is a lot of companies don't think about that at all. You've got 50 people, 40 of them have access,
Mhm.
admin access, and God knows what else. Then when you start having to go clean that up, it is way more painful versus just starting to build that up. Same
Mhm.
thing for, building out other systems and scale. Like if you just give some thought to it. And by the way, you don't build for what you need like 3 years later or 4 years later. That would kill a startup. It would never get off the ground. But you just have to have that in mind so that you know that what you're building right now, you can stack on top of it, or what will need to be replaced and so on. So just being deliberate about some of these things definitely
Mhm.
helps.
Mm. I wonder, so when it comes to like, I guess like, um developing your own skills as a CTO from like being an engineer to eventually the CTO. I guess like who is on your personal board of advisors, and I guess like how did you kind of also shape this board of advisors? Since I think we briefly touch upon you were an immigrant as well, and like how do you kind of like build up this kind of resources for yourself throughout the career journey?
It's a, I think that's a great question. That's one where I will tell you, I was originally less deliberate about, as
Hmm.
I could have been, and what I generally advise people to do is to think through that a bit more.
Hmm.
I think my journey itself was also not as intentional in the start. Like for example, what I loved doing was building things. I was a computer science major. I was a developer at heart. Loved building stuff. Like before ever getting any first job. And so I never really sought out leadership from that perspective. But the thing that I really did always want to do is figure out how we were having an impact on the user as well as on the business. And so that got me closer and closer to other functions in the business. And then that got me mentors from all sorts of different areas as well, like not
Hmm.
just from the technology side, but from the product side, the marketing side, the accounting side, and so on. And I think that was a really important part of the journey because it exposed me to so many different things apart from just how to write code. But how do you actually run those other aspects of the business? And so as I kept doing more and more of that, I kept getting invited into more things, and kept increasing my impact. But I think along the way, been very. You're right. Like as an immigrant, when you come here, you don't really know anybody, right? Like you've got your friends in school, and then you get your first job, and so on. So yeah, your network is pretty small, right? And so, and I personally was not as good or proactive as increasing it. And so I was very fortunate that I got to work with great people who saw potential in me and who gave me advice. And I think the one thing I did do proactively was I would seek out advice at least from the people that I knew, and then that kept increasing my network a bit more. This included having some great managers, like either direct ones or other execs in the company who then I continue to stay in touch with. I think one of the other interesting things was that along the way, you end up talking with different companies, either because they're looking for advice or they're trying to hire you, and you're not interested in that particular position, but you end up staying in touch with them, and you try to offer them advice, and they'll do the same for you, and that just starts building your network from that perspective, because you're only going to have a small number of jobs, right? Just a
Hmm.
handful of jobs, throughout your career. But I think as you continue to build out those relationships across across people that have reached out to you and still try to give some value to them in in whatever shape or form, that really helps increase that network. Stay in touch with every VC that that you've talked with. Some of my ex board members are still my mentors, and I owe them a lot from that
Hmm.
perspective. They were kind enough to continue to give me their advice throughout
Hmm.
my journey. Same with some of my ex colleagues and some of my ex bosses and so on. So I what's worked for me honestly is I've been proactive in trying to help other people at different levels. And so, and that in itself has, I think, opened the aperture for my own network in terms of the people
Hmm.
who I've then gotten to connect and who've helped me along the way as well. And so it's been a very much two-way street. And I've been less proactive at at reaching out and increasing my network, like from an advice perspective. I'm very fortunate that I have a very good one, like, at this particular point in my life. But I was less proactive about that versus proactive about helping others. And I think that second part really helped, like, foster the first one.
I love that. I feel like, you know, I think like being both a mentee and mentor can you can learn a lot from different people just because like the sometimes like when I was like younger, I feel like I constantly feel like, oh, I have nothing to add to the mentor. But like I think nowadays, I fortunately I also mentor some other younger people. And I feel like a lot of it or I feel like I learned a lot from the younger generation or like just like the people who are starting out. They have a like really fresh perspective for the universe. So I feel like it's like what you said about like deliberately building these relationships, but also like you can gain a lot of different perspectives from whether whether you're like young or old. You know,
I'll give you a very simple example, actually, on on that
Mhm,
particular one that's really broadened my horizons, throughout my journey. And again, this was very, it was not deliberate at all, but a very pleasant surprise for me. So,
mhm,
as you start working with the companies, because I was interested in working with other functions,
mhm,
I made a lot of friends who were outside of engineering, like, let's say
mhm,
marketing or product and so on.
mhm,
And sometimes, like, these people would come to you, for advice, not necessarily like, about a product thing, but could be about a leadership thing or about a conflict resolution piece and so on. And what I always tried to do was I always tried to basically be in their shoes and understand what they were doing, what they were trying to solve for, and that gave me a much broader perspective of different functions, of different problems. It helped me do my job better in terms of working with those functions, but it taught me so much more about those particular functions. And then what would happen is, let's say I learned something more about marketing. The next time I was talking with somebody else in marketing, I could give them advice on that particular feature, right? Because I
mhm,
learned from somebody in that function, and then I was able to give back that same thing to somebody
mhm,
either in that function again or to another function, right? To actually tell them, hey, this is the challenge that marketing was facing, or this is the challenge that finance was facing, and so on. So that really helped broaden my horizon. And I think the surprising thing to me was, because this was very unintentional, right? These are just conversations, you're just working with different folks and learning from them. And then people from other functions start coming to you for advice, and your first question you really think about is, why are you actually even asking me about this finance thing or about this
mhm,
product thing? And then you realize that you've gained enough knowledge, like, for that specific thing, that you can actually now help others in that particular area. And that, and it's because you've learned so much from those folks, right? Like, so I think as long as you're always open to learning from others, and and trying to put yourself in their shoes, that's usually, like, at least for me, that has worked out in a really good way. And I
mhm.
enjoy that so much more because I get to learn new things all the time when I'm working with other folks that are outside of my function.
For sure. I totally agree with you. Speaking of that, I feel like maybe we could dive into fandom since
Sure.
you're currently the CTO of the company. And so I want to start with like the business model from of fandom. So like, I think a lot of people consume fandoms like, like I guess like pages or like, they have been like using the company or like using the product, but they may not like I think a lot of people are just whenever I go on a website, I typically just see the content, but they don't really pay attention to the business model, the site itself and everything. Maybe we could for the audience to understand it a little bit better. So like from my understand, maybe we could start with a business model. So like, fandom have multiple different I would assume like revenue streams. There's like, advertising, there's subscription, there's partnership slash licensing, and there's community engagement, and there's like e-commerce, affiliate marketing. Why don't we talk about like, from your perspective, like, what is fandom's mission and then like how does it translate into these like different like business models and from like a leader perspective, like which part that you personally find most I guess like you spend the most time on, basically.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to talk about Fandom. And so, Fandom is a very cool company. We are the
Mhm,
world's largest fan platform in the entertainment and
mhm,
gaming space. We've got more than 350 million unique visitors, that come to our site every month. That squarely puts us in, a top 50 site from a traffic perspective on our worst day. Usually in the top 25 on our better days.
mhm,
Um, And our mission is to serve fans and all the types of experiences that they need from an entertainment and gaming perspective. And company was started many years back by Jimmy Wales, who started Wikipedia. And you could think of it
Mhm,
as him starting this as a Wikipedia of the virtual world and then continue
mhm,
to expand. And now, as you were saying, we do have multiple parts of our platform in addition to different revenue sources. So we've got our Fandom community platform, which hosts 250,000 plus communities with more than 50 million pages of user generated content. So, that in itself is the largest collection of content in the
mhm,
entertainment and gaming space. We also own a few other media brands from an entertainment and gaming standpoint. So, for example, one of the highest brands from a games perspective is GameSpot, which is an
mhm,
editorial brand on our site. We also own Metacritic, which is one of the best rating and review sites for games and entertainment. We also own TV Guide, which will help you find out what to watch and where to stream and so on. We own a few other things like Combine and Game of FAQs and so on. And then on the e-commerce side, we also own a very cool gaming commerce company called Fanatical.
mhm,
And so we try to cover the entire breadth from an entertainment and gaming perspective around being able to provide fans utility. But now, in terms of how we generate our revenue, one of the largest pieces of our revenue is through advertising. Given that we've got 50 million plus pages of content and 350 million people coming to our site, we do try to monetize part of it through advertising. But then there are other sources of revenue, as you said, there's affiliate, there's commerce, the direct to consumer commerce piece, that comes through
mhm,
Fanatical. We also have data insights products. We've created something. Um, that is powered by AI called Helix, Fan DNA Helix. Given that we sit on 50 million pages of user-generated content, we have some of the deepest insights when it comes to entertainment and gaming content. And so we've invested a lot over the last several years in terms of really being able to extract insights out of that content, being able to have the largest taxonomy in the entertainment and gaming space
mhm,
that's powered by AI, being able to have you know, being able to do a moderation and brand safety that's powered by AI, being able to create insights for our partners, both advertisers and game studios and movie studios, insights that are powered by our agentic AI engines. And so there's a lot that's happening in that, and then the revenue streams, of course, get diversified across those different areas, whether it's
mhm,
advertising, whether it's direct to consumer commerce, right? Whether it's affiliate, whether it's data services and insights. We talked a little bit about licensing as well. Whether you're licensing, the Metacritic ratings and so on. So yeah, there's a lot, and we're constantly in the market looking at other things that we can either build or add, all
mhm,
with the singular focus of creating utility for fans in the gaming and
mhm.
entertainment space.
I wonder, so like I think that's super cool. So first of all, like I was like just processing like how much content was like being like user-based content that's being created just because I think like on the internet right now, like a lot of the sites or like especially news site or like just like different sites are like created by like AI or like all the blogs are like written by like a team of people instead of like user generated content, which is like I think it's very valuable as like there's a lot more like diversity and like originality towards the content itself. And then number two is like I believe that you also build it like the fan DNA data platform. So I wonder, so like what are some stuff that you find interesting that you think we should be collecting based off this? So like for example, let's say um you have a lot of data about like the fans or like all these like content that's created by the user. I wonder what would be the piece of information that you find um interesting to track, and like is there like any interesting finding from these data? And I guess first of all, like how do you decide what kind of data to collect and then what actually matters? And number two is like is there like any patterns or like insights that you kind of like find valuable and insightful?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's most unique about us
Mhm,
is the content that we have on our platform that's very focused on entertainment and gaming. I mean, as you mentioned, there are tons of
mhm,
sites across the internet on all sorts of topics. There's no other site that has as much deep and rich content when it
mhm,
comes to entertainment and gaming. And the cool thing about it is that it's considered authoritative content. So it's not, our user generated content is not generally like, editorial and opinion based. It's very much about the lore and canon for all of those IPs. And so let's say, like, if you were going to the wiki or community for Star Trek called Memory Alpha,
Mhm.
things that you will find on Memory Alpha, or the things that you would find on Wikipedia, which is the Star Wars wiki, or or the Lord of the Rings wiki, those aren't going to be random opinions that people are creating. They're very much based in the canon and lore of those franchises, and so that is considered authoritative content. And so that's one of the reasons why we've got so much traffic, because when you're searching for any of these things, like, questions about any of the stuff, Google basically continues to send you to us, right? And so now, going about, what to collect, what to look at, this content is very, very deep. You're not just answering, like, one basic high level question. You can keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper into a particular character, into a particular storyline. And all of this is unstructured data and unstructured content, right? And so being able to create structured data out of it, that's been one of the most interesting challenges, because as you build models, like, the way models work is not that you just give it a page and ask it, hey, find every insight that actually comes out of it.
Mhm.
So you have to start by first saying, okay, what are the top line insights that we want to create? Like, you want to start being able to classify, a page, whether it's part of a movie franchise, a TV franchise, like, whether it's a character, whether it's a villain, whether it's a hero, like, and so on. Right? That's just at a very basic high level. Then you start going into the attributes of those things. Then you start looking at connections between that. What's going to be the connection between Superman and Iron Man, for example, right? Like, two
Mhm.
different IPs, completely two different storylines, but who's consuming this IP, who's also consuming the other IP? What are some of the interests that actually come out of that? What are the values that people are interested in that make them, let's say, consume Batman content versus, Star Wars content, or versus, like, something that's not completely non-science fiction at all? And being able to tie all of this together from a content perspective and your users' consumption perspective is extremely interesting. And then what we do with that data is, first and foremost, we leverage it to create more engaging experiences for our users. Again, like, in service of being able to create more utility for our fans, whether it's helping them, play a game better, get a question answered better, and so on. Whether it's creating recommendations for them to consume more content that they may not have thought about, but it's just going to be very interesting for them based on what we know they like, and so on. Right? So, so that's, very understandable stuff. And then creating those insights into, what you were referring to earlier, which was, FanDNA, but FanDNA Helix. Helix is like, the advertising product on top of it that will give insights to our partners and advertisers. So, if you're launching a game or if you're launching a movie, there may be certain obvious audiences that you want to go after, but there may be many others that you've never actually thought about. But because we have such a vast amount of data on what people like based on values, attributes, and so on, we can come up with new, unique audiences to
Mhm.
expose your IP to, like, for these partners, which
Mhm.
they may not have thought about at all. And we've seen really, really great success with that as we've started bringing this to market, as of last year. So there's just some very, very interesting aspects of our data that, that is powering all the AI work that we're doing. Because at the end of the day, any AI model that you create is only as good as the data that it can actually consume from a training set perspective. And when it comes to entertainment and gaming, nobody has as rich data and as much data as we've got in Fandom. So that makes it, very, very interesting and unique.
For sure. I totally agree with you. It's like, I guess, like, it's a concentration as well as, like, it's like the content density. How, like, I guess, like, the especially like the original content density.
Mhm.
Um and I wonder, so, like, in terms of like product building, since you led both like technology and the product development, so, like, I guess, like, how do you think of, like, first of all, like, what kind of new product to build, especially in the AI era? And number two is, like, what's your prediction on, like, where this whole, like, gaming slash, like, entertainment content is gonna go? Because right now I see, like, a lot of startups are, like, in the advertising space, since, like, I think, like, in the end of the day, Fandom lives off, like, advertising, and, like, I think the current content, like, a lot of, like, startups are doing, like, search, like, or, like, customized search based on right now because of like everything is going through like ChatGPT or Perplexity or like Anthropic, like so like when people are searching beyond the Google search, I think a lot of people, especially the Gen Z people, maybe they start with like ChatGPT, they start asking chat, right? So like how do you think of like making the content kind of like stand out from the algo perspective when it's
Sure.
like a search era?
So you're 100% right. That's the landscape for search is continuing to change. Not just even from the likes of ChatGPT or
Mhm,
Perplexity and so on, but the bigger players like Google, of course, are introducing more and more AI capabilities into their search as well. Right,
mhm,
like AI overview from Google reached 1.5 billion users.
mhm,
By a few months back. They've now introduced the AI search mode for the US audiences in their search. We see search GPT actually continue
mhm,
to increase market share, like on the open AI side. So the search landscape will continue to change. We have right now actually still been beneficiaries because of the richness of our content, and so things like AIO still end up
mhm,
referring more traffic to us. However,
mhm,
we can't continue to just sit on that, right? The search landscape will absolutely continue to evolve as AI is evolving. The thing that we focus on for that is not just how to make our content more searchable, because that's going to be a constantly evolving thing. What we focus on is how to provide more utility to our fans and users so that they're not just coming to our site from a search perspective. Because, yeah, if your question is getting answered somewhere else and the only reason you were coming here was to get that question answered, then you may not have a good reason to come, right? And so our focus is making sure that we create enough other value for you, enough other utility for you, that it's a must visit destination for you on a regular basis. So I think a lot of our product development that you will see in our roadmap, for the foreseeable future over the next few years, is all going to be about creating new value and utility for users, in addition to just being able to answer a question that they may have, and so on. And I think that's what will be most valuable in terms of continuing to have users engage highly with fandom.
mm,
And then,
uh,
when you're talking about, from an AI perspective around, how do we use that? I mean, that's part and parcel of pretty much most things that we think of at this particular point in terms of how can AI actually accelerate that product development. Whether you're using it on the
mhm,
engineering side to be able to, let's say, go through your backlog faster and develop more, or whether you're using it to power new engagement features that you may be creating. You may be using AI to create more powerful game guides or gaming agents, that people can use. And so, it's honestly like the sky is the limit in terms of the types of things that you can do. But our core focus, our North Star, is
mhm,
to basically create value for users. And
mhm,
the more value we create for them, the more. And this it's not a one silver bullet that just that provides
mhm,
value for every user. We've got 350 million people coming to the site, right? They're not all coming for the same thing, at the same time. And so it's not about finding one silver bullet that solves it in a really big way for all 350 million. It's about being able to build these unique experiences for different users, focusing on different things, so that you're really providing value across the board and not for just one particular scenario.
mm. I wonder, so like, who is the core consumer of fandom? Obviously, it's like the people who consume these like entertainment or like Star Trek or like any sort of like game and entertainment. But like, is there like a specific profile of people that's kind of like sitting through the screen? Like, are they like, I don't know, like 18 years old, college guys who are, playing World of Warcraft and or like what like I mean, I don't even know what younger people are playing these days, but like
Sure, no,
or
like
like is
it's
it like the TikToker or is that like someone who's like, in their 30s but living in Minnesota and then like just like, I don't know, like actually I wonder like is there any like kind of data that like shows out if there's like an actual core group of user and then when you're doing the user conversation as a CTO who runs product, runs technology, like is there any insights that's, like, very obvious to you that's like, "Wow, okay, so here's, like, what we need to, like, emphasize more?"
um So yeah, so first of all, in terms of like the audience that's coming to us, on the entertainment and gaming side, we're one of the biggest destinations for younger audience as they
Mhm,
interact, with entertainment and games. So we're one of the premier destinations for for brands to be able to reach the Gen Z audience, for example,
mhm,
or the millennial audience. And so it's we obviously have full numbers on that we continue to publish and share. With with our partners and publicly, you can actually see a bunch of that on our site as well.
mhm,
Just to give you an example, out of the out of the total audience that we've got every month, I think more than 160 million of those are coming there for games.
mhm,
Many of the others are coming there for different types of entertainment, whether it's movies, TVs, anime, and and so on. Anime, for example, is the fastest growing category,
mhm,
across the users. So so those are all very interesting
mhm,
insights that that actually come in, and so it's knowing our audience is obviously the core of of what we do. And
mhm,
one other interesting aspect is that we are the largest uh, site that's not owned by any particular franchise or IP. So when it comes to entertainment and gaming, we are the largest neutral site that goes across all entertainment and gaming IP, and that puts us in a very very unique situation to be able to reach all of these audiences,
mhm,
and remain neutral while still doing that.
mm. I feel like I wonder, so for the positioning and the competitive landscape, I guess, like, why do you feel like Fandom has the longevity compared to some of the other, media and gaming sites? I don't know if I want to name names because there's, like, a lot of different sites that have, like, I guess, pieces of fandom, such as, I don't know, like, Entertainment Weekly,
Sure,
comicbook.com,
yeah.
Vox Media, like, but
I think one key differentiator between all the ones that you just named and and many others in that space
Mhm,
is the difference between being a smaller editorial site versus a
mhm,
massive UGC platform. And
right.
so the biggest value that we have, and our biggest
Mhm,
distinguishing factor, is our massive community of millions of creators that are super passionate fans,
mhm,
of these IPs. Now, it's not an either or thing. I'm not saying at all
mhm,
that editorial sites don't add value. We actually have some of the
mhm,
top editorial sites as well. But when you think about it from a traffic and scale perspective, the scale that our community platform has that's powered by fans is
mhm,
larger than anything else that you can think of in the editorial world, whether it's owned by Fandom or whether it's any of our competitors. From a scale perspective, we're miles ahead of them. And it's
mhm,
really our passionate fans who create that content and then who consume that content that put us in that position. And that's,
mhm,
that's basically our secret sauce. That's our superpower. That's what helps us with the longevity. As you mentioned, right? Like the company's been around for a while. Like we were started in 2004 by Jimmy, and so we've continued to grow over time and are still growing at a very fast pace.
wow. Quickly saying hi to the audience. Hi, Seinan. So I wonder, so speaking of Jimmy Wells, I think I saw his talk at NFT NYC. This was like back in the, NFT era. I was speaking at NFT NYC. I was like browsing through all the talks, and one of them, it was like Jimmy Wells, I think. Um how do you think, like, I think the UGC content is such a interesting area because anything could be UGC, but, like, not a lot of, like, quality content are coming out of it. That's why people have editorial, right?
Yeah.
Um, so for Wikipedia to exist, I was already very fascinated. I was like, "Wow, this is something that's, like, literally kind of like a, self-organized,
Mhm.
um, situation that, like, across the globe, everybody could contribute to this thing that, like, kind of, like, also contribute to, like, everybody back because it's such a I don't know how Wikipedia is actually, like, being started, but, like, maybe I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit of, like, the fandom story at the beginning, like, how was this, like, is there, like, a particular, um,
So I'll give you,
sentiment?
I'll try to give you an example like that maybe illustrates the how Fandom became an offshoot, like of that. Like
Mhm.
first of all, like just kudos to Jimmy. Like Wikipedia is just
So crazy because, like, I think it's beyond Google even, like, I mean, no offense to Google, but, like, I think Google's
kind of
like, you have
offense
to
to
have
anyone.
something to search, right? Yeah.
It's yeah. Look, Wikipedia is absolutely awesome. Jimmy is an amazing person. I have the pleasure and privilege of working with him as he continues to be on the
Mhm.
Fandom board. And it's just delightful, to meet him every time and work with him. So I think one of the biggest strengths of Wikipedia, as well as Fandom, because it's an offshoot of that, was is the community moderation aspect. And so, that's the thing that makes sure that the content on Wikipedia is high quality. You've got passionate
Mhm.
people that are interested in different pieces of content. As you said, they self-organize. You end up having moderators and admins that come out of those communities. And so take that across Fandom and now multiply that by 250,000 communities, of
Mhm.
different topics, and
Mhm.
you will find super fans that will organically end up
Mhm.
rising in these communities and making sure that the quality of the content that's coming on to those wikis is absolutely accurate, high quality, and it's not just incumbent on on one person, right? Like these are self-organizing communities. That is one of the biggest things that maintains the standard for content that's on Wikipedia and on Fandom, and that's what keep bringing people back. That's why the content both on Wikipedia ends up being authoritative content for so many, like millions and millions of topics. And
Mhm.
same thing is what makes the Fandom content authoritative when it comes to the entertainment and gaming space. Now, in terms of how I think it started out, I'll give you an example, like that I used to think about, like back in the day. One of the reasons why, I think one of my first interactions with Fandom. It used to be called Wikia back in the day, and I may have had like previous interactions as well. But the first one that I remember very explicitly was when I was trying to search for more information on Game of Thrones back in the day, like when it had come
Mhm.
out. And I'll try to illustrate like the difference between how Wikipedia would cover Game of Thrones versus, let's say, how Fandom would cover it. And so let's say, like
Mhm.
let's pick a character, let's say, like Jon Snow, and
Mhm.
if you try to search for it on Wikipedia, in all likelihood you will get a page on Jon Snow. It'll tell you it's a character out of, like, this in this book, this show. Kit Harington plays the actor, and so on. And you'd have some basic information there, because Wikipedia, what it does is it focuses on the real world, and facts about the real world. What Fandom does so well is that it basically takes all of these virtual worlds and treats them as real worlds in their own right. And so let's say if you were to pick Game of Thrones, there would be an entire universe. And so, we wouldn't just have a page on Kit Harington and Jon Snow. You would literally have hundreds of pages around his history, around, like, his family, like, and every
Mhm.
single thing that may have happened, in his life, and so on.
Mhm.
And that's going to be considered authoritative content because it's coming from canon. It's not just random stuff that people have created. And that's where, like, the tight moderation, like, really,
Mhm.
really comes in. And you can extrapolate that to any IP. Like, I think our Star Wars community Wikipedia has a few 100,000 pages of content, and all authoritative content, right? So you can imagine the depth and scale, and that is one of the most unique things about Fandom that no other site on the internet has. And so,
Mhm.
major similarities between how Wikipedia started and how Fandom started, because they both were the offshoots of the
Mhm.
same thing. We were built on the MediaWiki platform that powers Wikipedia, and the community moderation model and stuff is exactly the same, but the
Mhm.
focus is different. We focus on all of these imagined worlds, like all of these virtual worlds in the entertainment and gaming space, and we treat them as real worlds because, honestly, the fans of these worlds treat them as real worlds, and that's the fun part. And that's probably
I
one of the things that brought me to Fandom as well, right? Like, I'm a huge fan of content when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy and fiction. You can't see all of my room, but it's full of interesting stuff,
Yeah.
and so
I
on.
yeah, I
And,
saw it the other day. I was, like, so impressed. I was
and
like, "You" yeah.
and so one of the really coolest things about about Fandom is that you will find so many of our other team members here that are way bigger fans of of their fandoms than I am. And so just
Mhm.
to get to work with these ridiculously smart people who are really good at, not just their work, but who really are so super passionate about all of their fandoms is just so much fun.
For sure. Also, one is actually linked to user, like everybody's sending the fire emoji right now. I wonder, so when it comes to like um a day in your life as a CTO, what
Mhm.
does it kind of look like at Fandom?
Sure. So I think I divide my focus in, across a few different things. Um, a good amount of time ends up getting taken meeting with people on different topics, whether it's the
Mhm,
strategy of, like, the next product that you're thinking of, whether it's
mhm,
the operational aspect of, what's being launched across different
mhm,
teams and their current sprints and how's that moving the needle, and, looking at
mhm,
those metrics, or whether it's, one-on-ones or skip levels, or, or team meetings. And so what I try to do is, because we are a very distributed team and we've got a large presence in, in Europe as well, the earlier part of my day ends up getting spent more with our teams or one-on-ones with people that are specially distributed, so that I can
mhm,
accommodate more of their time zones. And so my day starts pretty early from that perspective. And then I try to keep some time for focus, like, later in the day, where, by that particular point, the East Coast has gone, has basically gone offline, Europe has gone offline, and so I can have more of a focused time for, things that I need to do in terms of, like, if I'm working on a particular project, or if I'm doing research, or if I'm reading or studying on, like, the next thing that I want to learn at that particular point, or doing research on, like, new technology. And so that usually ends up being, like, towards the later part of the day, like, you're going to have external meetings during the day as well. Like, some of the more fun things end up being, but, when you dive into technical discussions, I don't get to do as much of that, and so I really really enjoy those. Like, when we're doing that, like right before this meeting, I was having a meeting across a few folks from my engineering team and our data team, as we were trying to figure out some new enhancements to our analytics and tracking systems and event tracking system that, we want to build in-house. And so that was a fun discussion, right? And
mhm.
but not every meeting is that, right? Like, some meetings are literally just going to be about operations and finance and so on, that are extremely important. Maybe not as much fun, like, for somebody more, but extremely extremely important, right? I honestly think one of the most important things that I at least try to do is still connect with people across my organization and the company in general. I think those connections across different functions in your teams are extremely important. And so it's not just one-on-ones with, let's say, my directs, but it's also occasional skip levels with, managers or leaders across my organizations, and, once or twice a year, skip levels with, with pretty much all the other different teams across my organizations as well, just so that,
Mhm,
there's always that connection, and always making sure that they know that I'm accessible. Because, when you get to meet with them and build that personal relationship, then it's easier for anybody to come and approach you for anything as well, right? Like, if they want to
mhm.
brainstorm an idea with you, or, or something. And so I try to invest time in that to make sure that people are always comfortable reaching out, even if they're not working with me on a day-to-day basis. I want them to be able to reach out without any hesitation, and so I try to invest a lot of time in that.
I wonder, so originally my question was like, how do you implement AI engine in the current workflow? Um, I was at like founders dinner the other day. People were saying that how they were like AI-fying their team was they would swap positions. So for example, designer become a product manager one day, product manager become like engineer one day, and the engineer become a designer one day. So like everybody kind of swap to see like how they're leveraging AI to like increasing the workflow or like improving the workflow. That's one part of like for example, like how do you kind of implement AI into like your day-to-day work, from building product to efficiency? The other part I was thinking, what if everybody just use AI to generate content, not only just search, but like, nowadays, like everything's AI-fied. Like, how do you kind of treat these like user-generated AI content? Are they even content or like, how do you kind of think of like the AI generated stuff aspect?
It's yeah. So I mean, two very different topics, right? In terms of how do you get your organization to adopt more AI versus AI generated content. I'll touch on like the
Mhm,
content part, quickly before going into the other one. So I mean, look, AI generated content is still content, but the question is whether it's original content or not. And that's because generative AI is always taking from something, right? Like there's some prior
mhm,
art that it's taking from, and you can argue that through the combination of different things that it takes, it can create certain original content as well. Like I wouldn't go as far to say that every single thing out of it is always derivative and there's there can't be any originality, but at the same time it absolutely, in my opinion, does not take away from the value of user generated original content. I think there's a huge amount of value that's ascribed to that. Now think about AI, right? Like Gen AI, like the quality of the content that it's going to create is going to be based on its training data sets and the content
mhm,
that's actually gone into that. And so if there wasn't any original content that was being created or that gets continued to be created, what is your AI even necessarily like feeding off of? And so one of our core tenets, and I can't stress this enough, and I spoke about this at one of our community conferences a couple of years back as well, is that when we use AI, from a product perspective and as a company perspective, it's about enablement and not replacement of our creators. And so
mhm,
when we use AI, we want to make sure that we use it in ways that will help our creators create content more easily, create content faster, create content like of a higher quality. But at the end of the day, they are still the ones in control. And so as we're introducing more AI into our products, we have made sure that the human aspect of it still stays there. And so let's say if we generate, we've done certain things where we use AI to generate certain types of smaller content. Again, not replacing the user generated content, but like, adding things on top of it. Like example, there's a feature called quick answers where, we can go through a large corpus of content and, and create like a few key questions that we know people are coming to. And the idea is that as they get those questions answered, then they want to read more and more and dive deeper. But
mhm,
we've involved our community into that. And so, the community that owns a particular wiki and so on have the final editorial rights. So AI may generate it, but they can add to it, they can remove it, they can edit it, and and that teaches our AI models more and more anyway. But we've always made sure that our creators are in control. Same with like we are one of when we think about AI and like the content on our platform, we are guaranteed the most brand safe platform that's out there from a content perspective, and we've invested a lot in making sure
mhm,
that our content is not just adhering to policies to make sure there's no abuse, there's no hate, but
mhm,
that it's also brand safe. Now the way we do that is by
mhm,
having this major orchestration of AI systems that we've built, but
mhm,
we give the final control again to humans to make sure that they can have oversight on top of that. So for us, it's been a combination.
mhm,
There's I can go through the whole change management of how we adopt AI on teams and stuff as well. But I don't know how much time you have on that. But that's
mhm,
another that's a topic that I'm always happy to talk about because we've been
mhm,
very deliberate and proactive and progressive about that particular aspect. We've not tried to treat it randomly, and happy to talk
mhm.
more about that if you have time.
For sure. I think we can definitely. Oh my god, sorry. I don't know if you can hear. There's like a very big noise,
All
but
good.
okay. So I wonder. So like for um the content that are like on the platform, what if there's like abusive content or like people copy someone or let's say like like for example someone just like it's like a I guess, like, is there any idea so I know that you mentioned it's, like, obviously, every most things are, like, UGC, but, like, what about, like, is there any editorial lens that needed to be applying to this to, like, kind of police people to, like, "Oh, don't copy each other," or, "Don't just self-promotional," it's like you promote 10 show, they're all, like, made it by, like, your organization, that kinda stuff.
Absolutely. And look, that's where there are two aspects of it that come in. One is around, making sure that the platform is safe. And so you don't have hate speech, you don't have abuse, you don't have bullying, you don't have, anything negative from that perspective.
Mhm,
And that, that's done uh, that's moderated by both a combination of AI, because that happens within a second, right? Like if you
Mhm,
try to post something, first of all, you may not be able to post it. But
mhm,
secondly, let's say if you do get through that, there's AI review that's happening almost in real time
mhm,
as you post something that's context aware. So it's not just about, let's say,
mhm,
blocking a word or something, but it's about making sure that it can understand the context of what's been written or edited. And let's say if it's green, right? It passes it easy enough. If it's not, then it gets escalated to a human reviewer to make sure that
mhm,
that gets reviewed before it goes anywhere. And then
mhm,
there are two aspects of this as well. One is around policy violations, so
mhm,
that there's no hate speech and all of
mhm,
those things that violate our policies. And the other one is brand safety. Like for example, you can pick Grand Theft Auto like that. GTA is going to be it was supposed to be the largest game released this year. It's going to be the largest game released next year. They've pushed it
mhm,
out now, but GTA is going to have content that may be perfectly reasonable from a policy perspective because it's about the actual game, but it may not be brand safe for certain for advertisers, right?
mhm,
Disney may not want their ad on a page from GTA that may be a little risky, right? And so those are two different aspects. So first we make sure that the content is not violating any policies and is safe. And then secondly, we've got an AI layer on top of it that also makes sure that it is brand safe. And for any of these things that gets flagged, whether from a safety concern or a brand safety perspective, uh, our systems immediately block it. And then there's
mhm,
a human review aspect to make sure that that it can be published or it can be monetized. That's one aspect. The other one that you were
mhm,
talking about in terms of somebody trying to promote and so on, there's certain things that will violate policies, and then there are other things that are just going to be in bad taste for a particular community. And that's where a lot of the community moderation comes in, right? Because the communities are moderated by fans who are super passionate and protective
mhm,
about the quality of the content that actually goes in it. And
mhm,
so, at our scale, with 50 million plus pages of content and 250,000 plus communities,
mhm,
there's no way that we can police every single piece of content
mhm,
outside of the policy violations or the brand safety pieces, right? Those we are responsible for, those we take care of. But then when it comes to the quality of the content itself, in addition to us, there are these passionate community moderators and super fans that are so vigilant about this that they're continuously moderating their communities to make sure that the content is so high quality. And that is one of the biggest reasons why our audience continues to grow and why our content continues to grow, because of all of our super passionate users that make sure that the content is so good.
for sure. Can I ask, like, just, like, one okay, so we just go back to the okay, I wanted to, like, piggyback on, like, this, like, editorial piece or, like, I guess, like, policing piece. So, obviously, you can police anything, but, like, I guess, what do you consider is a bad piece of content? So, is that, like, just, like, not thoughtful enough, or is that, like, AI generated, or, like, what is that bad content that should not be on the platform?
So I think, in my opinion, a bad piece of content is something that will violate our policies from a hate speech perspective, from bullying
Right.
perspective, from, let's say, copyright infringement perspective, and so on. When it comes to policing, we will absolutely make sure that we enforce our policies for making sure that the platform is safe for everybody, it's inclusive for everybody.
Mhm,
Now, when it comes to actually going in and deciding on somebody's opinion, that is something that we absolutely do not want to be in the business of policing, right?
mhm,
This is about inclusivity. It is about everybody, having the ability to be able to share their particular opinion. And when you think about content, you're going to have literally content on every single topic that you can think of. That's the beauty of having 50 million plus pages of content.
mhm,
And we absolutely in no way can be, or would ever want to be, the police of whether we want to censor somebody's view and all that, as long
mhm,
as they're not creating content that's hateful, that's against all of those policies that make the platform safe.
mhm,
The rest we would leave to our communities to moderate.
mhm. Okay, yeah, totally. Okay, so I wanna be mindful of the time, I don't want to drag you into, like, a 4,000 minutes conversation. Why don't we, do, like, a quick wrap? What's your favorite book?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Favorite movie?
A favorite book?
Ah, favorite book. If I had to pick, um, you know, from a fantasy perspective and stuff, I am very easily going to pick Lord of the Rings, like the Lord of
Mhm,
the Rings series. Like
mhm,
I've been a huge fan of that,
mhm.
since years and years and years. I think if I had to pick, like out of some of the leadership books, I mean, there's so many, but one that I absolutely love and always continue to recommend to people is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Uh,
Oh, she
that's
was the guest on our show too.
Yeah, no, no, she is
Yeah,
awesome. Like,
the
I've met
OG.
her, I've been at her talks. Like the first time I heard her talk many, many years back, I was like, okay, you're describing me. You're literally describing in terms of how I like to operate and stuff. And so that's, uh, it's her. Radical Candor is definitely one of my favorite books from that perspective that I recommend to people.
Love. Who? Oh, well, okay. So I'll ask you favorite movie.
That's a hard one. I love content. Like I watch way
Same.
more content than I probably should, and so it's hard for me to pick. I think favorites in terms of particular movie or TV show. I think the one that I can say from an IP perspective is something I grew up on, and even though I love so many different IPs, I think the one that I love the most is Star Trek. I grew
Mhm.
up on it, like
Classic
when I was
one.
in elementary school, and I've stuck through it.
Mhm.
Uh, and I got to meet William Shatner last year, which was a highlight of my year, and so on. So it's yeah, there's just too much content that I love and consume, probably way more than I have time for, which means I just probably sleep less. But but if I had to pick like one single thing, then I think it would be Star Trek for me.
Who will you invite to your dinner party?
Oh my god, I never think about these things. You're putting me in a tough spot. Honestly, I think I'd love to have a few people from the Strange New Worlds,
Mhm.
Star Trek Strange New Worlds cast.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to it being released in a couple of weeks. Like the third season that's coming out, and yeah, I would love to absolutely hang out with them.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
This is an easy one for me, in my opinion. And people pick leaders and public personalities and so on. I'm gonna very squarely and very easily say my parents.
So
Um,
true.
and,
Yeah.
and the reason I say that is for is for two reasons.
Mhm,
My mom gave me the confidence to pursue things that I wanted without ever having to worry about any handicap.
mhm,
And my dad gave me my work ethic in terms of working hard. I saw him like building his business, like working 7 days a week. I would go on like my the day off from school. I'd just go with him to spend time with him, and
mhm,
he was the hardest working person that I knew who was passionate about what he was doing. And then my mom like really instilled the confidence in me to go after things that I wanted without thinking of any obstacles, and figuring out different ways of solving problems, even though they may not be the standard ways of solving that particular problem. And so I
mhm.
can very, very easily say without any hesitation that I think the two people that had the biggest impact in my life and in my career were my parents.
Mm. Where can we find you outside work?
Oh, if it's the winters, hopefully on a ski slope. I love skiing, was always fascinated by it, learned it as an adult, and then just stuck with it. So absolutely love skiing. Love being outdoors when I'm not working or consuming content. So
Mhm.
even in the summers, you'll find me out on the water, in Lake Tahoe, or hiking on the mountains, or sometimes riding my motorcycles or playing with my dog. Absolutely love dogs. I've always had dogs my entire life. I have way more interests than I have time for, so I am extremely fortunate, from that perspective. So I don't think I ever get bored from that standpoint. So yeah,
Mhm.
too many activities that I want to do, generally almost never enough time. So yeah,
Love that. Well, Aldo, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation. I feel like I'm
thanks.
a big fan of what you have accomplished, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on, Grace. Like, it was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Awesome. Let me quickly unstream.